Ballistic missile threat inbound to Hawaii. Seek immediate shelter. This is not a drill. Hi folks, Canadian Prepper here. So as many of you know by now, there was a false alert sent out by Hawaii emergency management officials to everybody's phones. There's a system in place in which if there is an emergency of that scope, that everybody's going to be sent a emergency alert text messages. And so people were sent that text that I read you just before this video started, that ballistic missiles were inbound and that you need to take shelter. This is not a drill. Was it a drill? I'm sure there's some conspiracy theories floating around. Within an hour of any event like this happening, people are going to be yelling false flag. But in this case, you got to wonder. I mean, 40 minutes went by without them retracting this thing that they knew was false from the start. So you wonder why it took so long for them to get the message out that it was a false alarm. Now, if we were to just put on our tinfoil hats for a second and think about this, you might think to yourself, well, maybe they wanted to do a little bit of a social experiment to see how people would respond this day and age. And what better place to do it where people were primed for this sort of thing, mentally primed because of the whole proximity to North Korea. So anyways, you got the F-35s, the F-22s flying overhead every other day because they're doing all these military exercises. You have the historical context of Pearl Harbor in the mix with all of this. So people are mentally primed. What's more is that it's an island. It's as isolated as it gets. So you'd think if we got our tinfoil hats on now, that if you were going to do some social experiment like this, you would do it in a place like that where it was detached from the mainland, so the panic couldn't ooze out into the rest of the mainstream America as easily, perhaps, as it would if you were to do the same exercise in California. I mean, they probably already have a good understanding of what would happen, but culture changes, right? And people have been so primed with different, Hollywood depictions of doomsday. It's not the same game as it might have been in the 1950s when there wasn't this apocalyptic culture in the media. You didn't have people who were exposed to 50,000 different depictions of how it all could end. And maybe people have become somewhat desensitized to the whole idea of crap hitting the fan, particularly preppers, because, we talk about it all the time. If I seen that message, it probably wouldn't take me by surprise too much, to be honest. What would I do in that case? Well, unless I had a bunker, there wouldn't be a whole hell of a lot to do. But this should jumpstart people in their preparedness planning around if that was to happen. And if you do live in a large metropolitan area, where would you go? You should probably have some place, not probably, you should have some place pegged as a place you can go if you are going to be in the blast zone or the thermal range. It's the next range of a nuclear explosion. You should have some form of shelter, and you probably would want to be dug in pretty darn deep, several floors deep, and have some really good air ventilation system in order to ride that out. I don't even know. I'm not a nuclear war expert. It's not something that I really have cared to base a lot of my preparedness planning around, because I maybe there's a bit of hope to this, but I don't think it's one of the most likely scenarios. I know a lot of people are going to disagree with that, namely because if we're just talking about North Korea, that's not going to be WW3. I mean, that's going to be, they're going to fire a nuke or two. Maybe they'll attempt the EMP thing. Maybe that knocks out a significant portion of the US power grid, but it's still not World War III. It's just, a really crappy situation for a good couple of years. Whereas if China or Russia gets involved, then yeah, you have something really serious on your hands, and you would be definitely contemplating, especially if you lived in one of these large metropolitan centers, what you might do if the bombs started dropping. So Yeah, I mean, if you're a prepper and you live in a city, especially along the West Coast, then you should have some place in mind as to where you would go. Maybe it's a basement in a larger skyscraper. Maybe it would be, somewhere down in the subway. People were apparently putting their kids down into the sewers. Anyway, so now the emergency management teams are doing damage control. They're trying to come out and say how sorry they are that all of this happened. They're really trying to frame it around this story of blaming it on one guy, which leads me to believe that, maybe there was some conspiratorial aspect to this. Maybe this was a social experiment, because I mean, it would be strategically sensible to do something like this. You would want some sort of real world trial run to see how much time before people started going crazy. And why 40 minutes? Well, maybe it was around that time when they started noticing that there was some real social deviancy starting to go on. Like, maybe in the first 5 minutes, people are just breaking bylaws. Then the reality sinks in. 10 minutes after you get a message like that, everybody around you is starting to feel the panic. That's when maybe the municipal laws start being broken. That's when people start contemplating filling up their shopping carts and darting out of the grocery store without paying. 20 minutes goes by. That's when people are starting to put others at risk on the roadways. Maybe they're driving in the ditch. Maybe they're not obeying traffic laws. 30 minutes, 40 minutes. That's when you probably start to have those state and federal laws starting to be broken. So I think the further you extend out from an alert that's put out like that, the more crazy things are going to get. While everybody's in that mad scramble to self-preserve, nobody's going to be really thinking sensibly unless you're a person who really is prepared for something like that, which I think even amongst preppers, few of us are prepared to really fully endure something like that. There's guys out there who have been preparing for the nuclear war, Cold War stuff for a long time. They know everything that there is to know about it. They got their bunkers, they're ready for this. But lots of people aren't. So I'm pretty sure that situation was rife with a panic, and they probably wanted to see. I mean, if I was somebody who was in charge of the emergency management planning, I could see the benefit of doing a social experiment like this. I mean, how could you not? You would want to see how people responded. And the added benefit of something like this, of course, is that now people perhaps are going to take it more seriously. Now people have been primed with that. Nobody's going to forget this because the panic that people were probably experienced with this is going to stick with them forever. It's kind of like, when you see the 9/11 attacks, they call it flashbulb memory. Most people know where they were when JFK was shot, when, of course, I wasn't born yet, but you get the point. When September 11th happened, I remember where I was, I remember the time of day, I remember who I was with. It's a flashbulb memory, so a lot of people, that experience that they had in Hawaii is going to dig deep. And it's probably going to stick with them, and hopefully it's going to make them more preparedness minded. So yeah, as crappy as it was for that 40 minutes of their life, I'm actually glad that they had a chance to experience that, because now everybody in Hawaii has no excuse. You already know what it's going to be like. Now you have a taste of how unprepared you truly are to endure a situation like that. So no doubt, if I was an investor right now and I was looking at Hawaii, I'd be investing in the bunker market, because I can guarantee you that there's going to be a lot of people buying bunkers, those who can afford them anyways, after this event, because people got a rude awakening of the reality of a crap hits the fan scenario. Think about this: 24 hours out of the day, the average person, probably you're spending 12 hours a day away from home, whether you're at work, you're commuting, maybe 6 to 8 hours a day if you're me, 4 to 5, you're sleeping. So what does that leave you with? Well, and then the other maybe 4 hours of the day, you are probably preoccupied with something. What I'm trying to say is that there's never the likelihood that crap hits the fan is going to happen when you want it to is very low. Chances are it's going to catch you off guard. It's going to catch you when you least expect it. You're going to be stuck in traffic. Your kids are going to be at this place. Your wife is going to be at this place, or your husband's going to be at this place. Family members are going to be scattered. You will be in the middle of fine-tuning one aspect of your prepping, which you haven't quite fine-tuned yet. And of course, it's an essential part of the whole thing, whether it's water, food, security, medication, whatever the case might be. And something is going to go wrong. Murphy's Law, right? So it is what it is. So I think that this is a good, not only exercise for the people who experienced it, but a reminder to us all that just like that, things can happen. It's never going to happen when you want it to. I did a video probably about 3.2 years ago or something like that, where partway through the video, I said that, what would happen if crap hit the fan right now, and then I cut to some static and the emergency broadcast system, just to simulate the fact that things can happen at any time. I think we have this idea that it's going to happen when we want it to, but nothing could be further from the truth. Chances are it's going to happen in the dead of winter, when people rely on fuel to heat their homes. It's going to happen when it's going to suck the most. It's not going to happen in summertime when the birds are chirping and the temperature is just right, and you have a fully stocked firewood, fully stocked pantry right after you went to the grocery store, when everybody's home and safe in the house and you have absolutely nothing to worry about. Chances are it's going to be quite the opposite, just like we've seen here. So what do you guys think? Maybe I'll put a poll on this video. Do you think that this was a planned exercise which was masqueraded as an accident by this one employee that they keep blaming it on? Now consider the 40-minute thing, because 40 minutes it took them to correct this. They do those trials where they tell people that this is just a test. You're getting this message from the emergency alert system. They do it on all the radio stations. They do this all the time. So the idea that it took them 40 minutes to respond, doesn't that seem a little bit suspicious to you? But say, for instance, this was a social experiment, and that they did do this and they deceived people because they wanted to see how people would react. We need to keep in mind that that's not necessarily a bad thing. Like I said, that this is probably something that needed to happen. From a militaristic standpoint, any information that you could learn through some social experiment like this would be valuable. Of course, not only for the military, but for the civilian population. Even though it was traumatizing, I think a lot of good can come out of this, not just for Hawaiians, but for every other person in not just the United States, but elsewhere who's aware of this story. Because information is going to be collected about how people reacted, and that information could potentially save real lives in the future. So this is where, most conspiracies, when we talk about them, it's as though there's this sinister nature to it all. I don't think you could argue that there would be a sinister nature to this, even if it was a deception. This is one of those things that if they did do it, it was for our own good. And, it is what it is. The only way it works is if it catches you by surprise. The only way to truly simulate a natural experiment is to do it. You have to observe things in their natural environment to really get an understanding of how things are going to play out. Anyways, folks, that's my 2 cents on the matter. Me and Loki are signing out. So say goodbye, buddy. Oh yeah, don't forget, tomorrow we have the second part to the video I did about unavoidable disasters from 2018 to 2030. We're going to want to check that out. Probably be up Tuesday morning-ish, something like that. So stick around. And if you like videos like that, you can go check out my Patreon page. That's what really funds videos like that. Those videos cost a lot of money to make, and it sucks that it kind of has to come to that in order to parlay information in a way which is more generally applicable and gonna generate some universal interest, because I don't want to just be preaching to the choir in this prepping echo chamber. You know, some of you guys have been with me from the start 3-4 years ago, and that's great. You probably know everything I have to say already, more than I know myself perhaps. But in order to bring more people into the fold, and in order to spread more general awareness about emergency preparedness, we have to make videos like that, which, although they might seem basic to a lot of us, to most people they've never been exposed to that line of thinking before. So consider that. So it makes it more palatable if you have the multimedia to embellish what you're saying. Anyways, check it out tomorrow. Thanks for watching. Canadian Prepper out.